We hear all the time, I'm fully covered or I have full coverage. Well, unfortunately, I have bad news. Full coverage or fully covered is not actually a legal term. When we're talking about full coverage or being fully covered, the second scenario that is really important to understand are, let's say you're in a crash and there are injuries involved. And so there are a few different important things to know in this scenario. The most common and important type of insurance to know about when there are injuries involved would be bodily injury, or we call it BI here in the office. So bodily injury, let's say you have it on your own policy. If you rear end somebody and you hurt them as a result of rear ending them, your bodily injury coverage would be the type of coverage that would pay for their injuries. And so vice versa, let's say you're rear ended and you are injured in the crash, then the at-fault party's bodily injury coverage would be what would compensate you and pay for your injuries. The second type of coverage that's really important to understand and consider, I always recommend having this on your policy, would be coverage, which stands for Uninsured Motorist coverage or Underinsured Motorist coverage. This is for the scenario where, let's say, you're rear-ended, you sustain injuries as a result of being rear-ended, and the person who caused the crash doesn't have any bodily injury coverage to cover your injuries, or they don't have enough. That's where your coverage would come into play. There's another type of coverage that everybody has to have on their policy in the state of Florida called PIP coverage. And that's because we are a no-fault state. Most people have heard that term. PIP coverage is only going to pay for medical bills and some of your lost wages, but it's not going to cover them all. And so you could also look at, and I have this on my own policy, it's called medical payments coverage or med pay. And so that's an additional source of funds that would only pay for medical bills. So those are really the two big scenarios that you need to understand in order to make sure that you're fully covered. And so there's really two separate categories of claims that could potentially come up in a car accident. Obviously, one of those is for the car itself. We call that the property damage claim or the damage to your vehicle. And as far as what fully covered would mean with respect to the property damage claim, there's a few important things to know. In the state of Florida, the only mandated coverage on an auto insurance policy is property damage coverage. And this actually doesn't cover your vehicle at all. It covers other people. If, for example, you rear end another vehicle, the property damage coverage is going to cover them. However, in that scenario, if you only had property damage coverage and no other coverages for the property damage claim, your insurance company would pay to fix the vehicle that you hit. However, you would have actually no coverage for your own vehicle. And so when you want to be fully covered, and we all want to be fully covered, right? You also want to make sure that you have collision coverage. So collision coverage is going to pay to fix the vehicle no matter who's at fault. So it'll pay to fix your vehicle if you're at fault. And then also you want to look at what's called comprehensive coverage. So comprehensive is going to pay for damage to the vehicle outside of a collision. So let's say you're driving down I-4 and there's a hailstorm and it destroys your car. That's where your comprehensive coverage would come into play. And then another type of coverage with respect to damage to the car itself, I always recommend is rental car coverage. And so this is something, and I've had this conversation so many times, this is something that you don't know you need until it's too late. And so For example, let's say you're in a crash, even if it's not your fault, you're in a crash and the person who caused the crash is uninsured and you don't have rental car coverage on your own policy. While your vehicle is being repaired, there's actually no insurance money to cover a rental car. And so in that scenario, you would be stuck without a vehicle unless you happen to have an extra vehicle for some reason. Let's say you're in a crash and your vehicle is totaled, and the insurance company, whether it's your own insurance company or the other person's insurance company, they actually only owe you the cash value of the vehicle. And so, for example, if you owe more on your loan for the vehicle than it's actually worth, then that's where gap coverage would come into play and it would sort of bridge the gap or pay for the difference between the two. If you don't have gap coverage in that scenario, your vehicle could be totaled and you could actually be paid less than you owe on the loan, yet you would still owe the full amount of the loan. Again, if you believe you are fully covered or have full coverage, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, especially, I've heard it used by some insurance professionals where they consider somebody fully covered if they have the state minimum insurance. And so that's certainly not full coverage, in my opinion. So it's really important to understand these things so you'll be protected in the event that something bad happens. Your family will be protected and you won't be stuck holding the bag or realizing that you weren't actually fully covered.